Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm Greg Nettle, and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where our vision is for every child on the planet to have a church. We do this by helping you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. This is a very special episode of the Church Planting Podcast. It's our 100th episode. Thank you for that. And on this episode, we're going to start where we started. Why church planting? Very special guest, Paul Taylor. Paul is a new friend who is going to become one of my closest friends, I have a feeling. Paul and his wife, Farah, are the co-founders and lead pastors at Rivers Crossing Church in Cincinnati, which they planted a few years ago. It's grown to multiple thousands of people. They plant churches. They are the co-founders and presidents of the Extraordinary Church Collective, a church planting agency. Paul is passionate about reproduction and multiplication. Welcome, Paul Taylor, to the Church Planting Podcast. Well, everyone, we're celebrating this episode on the Church Planting Podcast because this is episode number 100. So thank you for being able to join us on the Church Planting Podcast. It's been an absolute delight for me. One of my favorite things I do because I get to meet so many incredible leaders and learn so much personally. So thank you for supporting it and being faithful listeners and sharing it with your friends and colleagues. I'm really excited about the 100th episode, though, because I have who's become a very new and dear friend to me, Paul Taylor, on this episode of the Church Planting Podcast. Paul, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast.
Thanks, Greg. Congrats. Number 100. That's huge. Big deal. Way to go.
Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah, exactly. Check out, though. Honored to be here and right back to you.
So, Paul, there's a reason why you're the 100th episode. So episode 1 of the Church Planting Podcast those years ago, 3 years ago, was simply, why are we involved in multiplication? Why are we so committed to church planting? And when you and I were involved in a Blue Sky event just a couple of weeks ago about planting 20,000 new churches, unique new churches in the United States together. And, I saw your passion and your heart for multiplication. Paul, why are you so passionate about multiplication, about church planting?
Well, Greg, I think we shared a lot of similar DNA, different journeys, but a similar passion. And thanks for being a part of that. Amazing. So excited about what God's going to do through that initiative. But for me personally, I think it all boils down to it's the most effective way to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. I think I simply that, it's not for anything to be new, creative, different. Obviously, in the future of the church is a huge concern, but I think when you look at it biblically and you look at it practically, it is the most effective way to make I'm an evangelist, so play my cards early. So, to see someone come to faith in Jesus Christ, there's nothing greater. I rejoice with the angels in heaven over one more, and I think that church planting is the most effective way to do that. So from the beginning, we said, hey, if we can plant churches, we're going to win more people to Jesus and make more disciples. It'd be our part in the Great Commission. So that's really what it boils.
Paul, yeah, my personal life statement, and my cards on the table as well. I'm an evangelist also. And so it's to reach as many people as possible in the most effective way possible with the good news of Jesus Christ. And today, the single most effective way of doing that is through new church planting. If there was a better way, I'd go do that, just to be real candid with you. But there's not a better way. So you talked about your journey. You're a church planter, and give us some background on that. When did you launch? How old's the church? And when did you start getting involved in church planting as a church plant yourself?
Church kid, grew up in church. Dad was a lay pastor, missionary. So I heard the gospel my whole life. He was Church of God of Cleveland, sent out on the mission field, came back, switched to Baptist. So I'm a Baptist-costal.
Yeah.
But I didn't know Jesus. And, I'm 51, so a lot of 80s turn or burn evangelism turned me off. I ran far, far, far from God. Got radically saved at the University of Georgia, Go Dogs, where I was playing football and was far from Jesus. And I got saved through parachurch. And for me, it was the first time I really heard what I would call the gospel of grace. I've heard a lot of rules, a lot of legalism. So when I heard about grace and Jesus saved me, it was just like a instant radical life change. I knew I was called to ministry. Honestly, was bitter at the local church because I was in it 4 times a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you get perspective as you age, right? It's like, of course I heard the gospel, but my time was my time. And then, I quickly was called to the local church and started serving on large church staffs. I had no clue what a mega church was. And all of our church staffs were mega church because I just wanted to see people get saved, and I did young adult ministry and youth ministry for a lot of years. And in 1999, I was doing my kind of year-end evaluation, setting goals for
Me too. I do the same thing. Yeah.
Y2K, baby. It was a big deal back then. Those young people have no clue. And I was just writing things down and heard God call me to a fast I had promised him. I really never fast. Baptists don't go very long without eating. And I did that 40-day fast, and I did 21 days of water, and then switched to, like juices and stuff like that. And on day 21, I got my call to church planting. I was reading Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Church, and I sat it down and was praying, and I heard it clear as day. I had no contextual clue what that meant. I mean, there were no books, there was nothing, and I knew it was somewhere down the road. So we accepted a call to come up to Ohio. I prayed when and where. I'm like reading Rick.
The heart that.
And I'm from the South, and my wife's from the Cincinnati area, which is where Rivers Crossing is. And I told her, she's the only person I told. And I said, well, babe, I prayed like Rick Warren. I prayed when and where. God told him Orange County, suffering for Jesus. But I think he's saying Cincinnati. And 2 years later, we accepted a call to come to a church that wanted to plant churches. We were on staff there for 6 years. And then we launched Rivers Crossing. Started with 3 couples in a basement, praying big prayers in the winter of 2007, and we launched September the 23rd, 2007. So we're heading on year 17, I guess, in September. We're about to turn 17 years old. We're teenagers. We got a couple more years of being a teenage church. So that's the very high level, very fast version of our church plan.
And you've experienced great favor in Cincinnati, and God has blessed your leadership and so forth. And so. But you guys when did you start thinking as a church planter again, hey, we've got to be reproducing, multiplying as well?
Well, we said that. It was kind of in our DNA from the beginning. We said, hey, we're going to be a church planting church. When we went through assessment, I remember one of the speakers, we were getting assessed with a big group. I think there were 24 candidate couples at this assessment. Yeah. And I remember someone saying, don't be the cul-de-sac of Christianity. He said, don't plant a church, plant a church that plants a church that plants a church. And so we said, you know what, we're setting that in our DNA early. And really, we had no experience. We had no proof that it's the most effective way to reach a lot of people other than what we had heard. But we said, you know what, we're going to do this. And then God put us to the test. Literally 2 months later, we were 4 months before launch, and another church that was planting 6 months after us in our county, same region. They had the same demographic study. We did our final sermon at our sending church, and someone on the trustee board came up to me and said, I love your website. And I'm like, and that's kind of like, we don't have a website. Since 2007 though, right? We had one and we had reserved a URL, but, and I'm like, oh, well, really? How did you see our website? Well, Rivers Crossing Community Church. I immediately run back to my, big fancy office and my sending church and jumped online and see this church, same demographic study, same name. This is back in the day where you catch on to a local, developing community. And there's this development that it took about 15 years to develop called Rivers Crossing. And we were trying to be like the church of the place kind of deal. Well, obviously this guy was doing his homework too. So we set up a phone call. I left him a voicemail and said, hey, I'm the pastor of the other Rivers Crossing Church, which we dropped community several years ago, but Rivers Crossing Community Church. Website. Our demographic study. Similar vision values kind of thing. And I'm going, oh my gosh, what's happening? He was launching in Easter of 2008. We were, launching in 2006. And left a voicemail. We connected. We had done our homework and we had incorporated all the stuff. but we didn't want to argue about it. We're like,
Yeah, I get it.
right?
Yeah.
So my executive pastor is still with me. He was still in the marketplace at the time. We're sitting in my office on the second phone call where we didn't play our card. We didn't say we've incorporated you have it. We want to be that guy. And he's talking and, oh, we're so sad. You guys obviously did our homework. And then I put him on mute and asked my executive pastor, I said, Jeff, when's his launch date? He said, it's Easter. And at this point, we had just opened our checking account officially in our name. We're still on staff with the other church. We're in fundraising mode. So our first 3 checks were 5,000 people. We had $15,000 in the bank. We had a bunch of pledged money coming in.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if he's planting, that means he's raising money. And I said, if we're going to be a church planting church, we have to start now. So let's give him some money and show him that we care.
No way, dude.
And we both, I took 2 Post-it notes and he said, how much you want to do? I'm like, you write it down, I write it down, then we're going to flip. This guy's still talking the whole time. Like he's telling us, about, well, here's our other names and we're going to switch to this. And like, I wasn't even listening. And we just counted down 1, 2, 3, flipped it. And we both wrote $5,000. And then we just gave away 1/3 of our checking account. And I think what God did through that was set it in our heart that A, you can't outgive him. B, you got to put your money where your mouth is. You can't just say we want a church plant. You have to before. And that was June of 2007. We didn't launch for another 4 months. And so it just started this momentum of like, you know what? If we're generous and we invest in what we say we value, then God will bless it. So that we just got the bug early in Austin.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that, but I need to know, did they end up changing their name or is there still a Okay. They did change the name. Okay.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah. They did. So there's no confusion. There's not.
Yeah. $5,000 for $5,000. We're happy to change our name. We're a church planters. Yeah. I get that mentality for sure. Okay. So but today now you are very intentional about church planting. It's one of the things, we've partnered together, on multiple church planters over the last 2 years together. And I've loved to see your systems and processes. Talk about what has led to that more deeper development of multiplication.
Yeah. Early on it was you're building your local church and you're casting vision. And I would say things from the pulpit, like there may be someone in the room that's called to plant a church, so we consistently put it in our DNA. But, when you're that same guy who flipped that Post-it note with me, I think we were 5 years in, we got out of high school, bought our first facility, and he came to me about 4 months before that in the process of negotiating all that. And, that he felt called to plant our first, we called it a plampus. It was a hybrid plant campus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that also means you got to be prepared to send out your best people.
Yep.
And let them go. So it's very hard. So not only are we doing this campaign to buy facility I'm sitting in now with the old movie theater, but on Easter Sunday of 2012, we sent out our best guy with 30 of our top leaders to go start what has now become, we spun that off as an autonomous church plant. So that made us realize, we need more systems. We've been partnering with another organization that we helped. We did assessments. We've always believed in the power of assessment, coaching.
Yeah,
We've done all that. We've done all of that stuff, and including a lot of, like you said, partnership in the last couple of years with Stadia. So we knew we would always, when we would talk to church planners, we'd say, if you haven't been assessed, and the conversation needs to start after assessment. We love you, value you, but get assessed. And we would tell them, we're like, and we don't, there's about 3 organizations that will tell you we will accept, and Stadia was always one of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And along with Excel Leadership Network, which we used to be a part of, JD Parent.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah.
And we help lead a lot of church planting as far as assessment through that. My wife and I have a passion for really helping church planters know who they are and then take some steps so they don't go in blind or they don't blow their life up. So that led us to within a year, we doubled when we moved into this facility. So we had to do back-to-back campaigns.
Wow. That's fun.
Yeah. 5 years straight of campaigns. But God was in it, and that enabled us to build a bigger auditorium, that kind of stuff. So that second campaign to expand our current facility, we said we want to give away a tithe of that, 10% of that towards missions. And for us, missions is always connected to church planting. Even our international stuff is connected to the church planting movement. So and we just made up that, like, okay, what seems, here's a little seed money. And that was a $3.8 million campaign. So we said 380,000. We're going to put towards starting 10 churches in 10 years.
Nice.
And we knew that wasn't enough. That'd be seed money. And so that became what we lovingly called 10 and 10.
Yep.
So that turned into a little network, which is some of our mutual friends were the last two churches in that.
Yeah.
Patrick Holden and Mark were the last two. So we
and they're just crushing it. I love those guys.
They're awesome. They're awesome.
Yeah.
And you guys have been huge. They speak so highly of what you're doing. But that took us 7 years and 11 months. And then out of that, we birthed last January, we birthed a network called the Extraordinary Church Collective, which has more systems and coaching, just the things that we know how to help with.
Yep.
We're not like what you guys have available in the app. Amazing. We don't have that kind of content. We're looking for guys who, if they didn't even know a church planting network existed, that they at least have the natural leadership to draw a team, build a team. But then we're going to point them to other people like, hey, if you need systems and you need these things, there's other people out there who do that way better.
Paul, that's the beauty of the kingdom, right? Is when we get to, collaborate together. Who cares who gets the credit? That's what I always say. It's just about
100%.
And I think that's, you and I, that's the other thing that you have to have as a leader, if you're serious about multiplication, there has to come a point in your ministry where you say, this is not about Greg Nettles' kingdom. This is not about Paul Taylor's kingdom. This is about God's kingdom. And if you can get to that point where you die to being on the cover of Outreach magazine and you die to this, hey, I lead a church of X. And I'm not saying it's bad to be on the cover of them. That's not what I'm saying. For me personally, I had to go through a death of myself to go, hey, this is not about me or me pointing to my church and saying, God, look what I did. This is about, man, growing fruit on other people's trees, as
it's so good.
He used to say, Okay, so what are you watching right now? What lights your fire now when it comes to multiplication?
That's a loaded question. I think there's multiple things that really, when you have an apostolic heart, I think anything that's about to start, I have to have I want to pastor one church if the Lord wills for my life.
That's what I've got to do, just so you know, Paul.
I know. I rebuke that.
25 years, man.
So if I get 25, I would be very happy.
Yeah.
But I also know that I have to have my hand in the start and scratch that activator. I have activator in my top 5 string fighter. So that just gives me that itch. But I think what excites me is just, at least in my 17 years of church planting journey, there's more openness. You saw this at the Blue Sky event. There's just this openness among church planting movement to say, hey, how can we collaborate? How can we win more people? How can we be open to, future technology? How can we plant churches in hard places? We just had another name I'm going to add to the list for our collaboration.
Awesome.
We're partnering with they're actually local, and it's one of those things we're a mile apart for all these years, and they have a huge ministry to Islamic countries.
Oh, wow.
Couple, one from Lebanon, one from Egypt, both believers who they speak the language, and the gospel is exploding around the world in really hard places that sometimes we can't plant a church in Syria or Lebanon or Iran or Iraq.
Yep.
They can, and they're doing it digitally.
Oh, wow.
And then they're going over in these underground churches and they call it the redeemed, these baptisms. I'm going to Lebanon in September because I'm so excited, because if we could get the vision into church planters here for a fraction of their missional dollars.
Exactly.
We could make investments. We had this discussion together, but we could make investments in places that, for some of us, we think, oh, how do we ever reach that segment of the 1040 window that's so populated with Muslims, and they're just having an anointing to do that. So those kind of things really
let's rip on this a minute, because that's one of the things you and I talked about that we're most excited about, is this idea when we think about digital church planting, where you don't have to have millions of dollars tied up in a camp, buildings and so forth. What if that's done well? It could open the door to millions upon millions of dollars being freed up to doing exactly what you're saying. That's one of the things that I'm most excited about with digital planting is the overhead costs down so that more can be given away to start new churches.
Yeah. And then even in the, the mega church, giga church world, we need that, the momentum of a larger church, because if they run frugally and they consider, like, we still operate like a church plant.
Yep.
And if they can keep their staffing dollars, the larger your church gets, there's more demand for someone to be paid to do it. But that's why you got to equip your people to start equipping the saints. Then we can free up dollars. If we can get that vision into more mega church pastors who aren't currently involved in church planting, and giga church pastors to go, hey, 1 or 2% of your budget could go a long way to reaching the world.
You and I talked about that. Tithe of a tithe, right? It's 1% of 10%. And if we could get that embedded in all the churches in the United States, it would dramatically change the world with the gospel.
Without a doubt.
Hey, Paul, I got to ask you this question. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing multiplication right now?
There's a lot. I think funding, it costs more to do it more than ever. So
in the U.S. it does. Yeah.
In the U.S. Let's talk North America for a second. Let's talk the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money in some of the hardest places.
Yes.
I was just having a conversation with a potential planter that we're looking at signing from San Diego, which San Diego just has moved to the #1 most expensive city in the U.S.
I did know that. Okay. Hey, okay, we got to talk about San Diego because we got a big network of Stadia plants there that could come alongside whoever this is. So let's talk about.
Let's talk. We will. Yeah. But so that's a barrier. So that's a barrier. And then I think for me, the biggest barrier is, and I've been in some big church planting settings, and I think the nature of a planter is there's a little bit of self-preservation. There's a lot of fear. Is the thing going to fail? Can God, it's that conflict of fear.
Fair enough.
And so they're so like, we just have to survive, that they don't have that what's next, or who can I raise up, or how can I cast vision, or even if we can't put a ton of money towards it, like you said, we can put something towards it. So if God continues to grow what we're doing locally, that giving is going to continue to grow. And then when God raises up someone from within, like he did for us, and he's your best of your best staff, that you don't go, oh no, you can't leave.
Yep.
So if we can get that into planters' heart, and then some of the things we talked about at the Blue Sky event, apologize for listeners if a cool thing that God's done recently, so it's fresh in my heart. If we can get some of the planters to go, hey, we can plant for $400 a month. We can be helping plant a church in Togo for $400 a month.
No, it's $400 a month
or whatever.
It's one-time cost of $350, Paul. It's insane. If we could get every church plant in the U.S. to plant a church for $350, or for $6,000 in India, or whatever it costs in Lebanon, that's
a game changer. And those are reachable. Those are reachable for a, and that's why it's so important we collaborate. Because if we can get some of those movement momentum makers, like we're a new church plant, and we're celebrating some joint ventures where guys are launching with 600, 700 people. And they've got capacity. They could be helping plant 5, 10 churches in Togo or India just off their missions giving, right? Yeah. So those are if we can get, I think the challenges are to get that into the heart of the next wave, the next generation of church planters from the start, and not thinking, oh, we'll do that when.
Yes.
When we have the money, when we have the time, after we build this, then we'll think about that. No, it's both and. Do it now. And I think God pours more fuel of his anointing on what you're doing locally when you're also willing to multiply.
I think that's a biblical principle. Neither one of us are health and wealth guys, but I've watched it. The more open-handed when we bless people, the more God entrusts to us. If we
just does.
Church planter to understand that God is looking for, I think, planters who will be faithful and caring about things that are in his heart and investing in them. And when we do, God entrusts us with more.
I 100% agree. We're conduits of the gospel and conduit of resources. And if that can happen, then
there'll be a cul-de-sac for Christianity.
Don't.
more resources.
That's right.
Brother, I could go with you all day. I want to a couple last real fun things. What are you reading right now? What's something you're reading recently?
Well, I'm on study break. Started this week, so I'm reading the Surratt book on finishing well. I believe the title of it. I'm 40 pages.
I haven't read it yet. I need to pick that up.
Yeah, Judd and Surratt, really the heart of guys who are a little more towards our age, and I think it's important that young guys, get this too.
I agree. Yeah.
Too many people not finishing the race, and when I hit 50 a little over a year ago, and I'm like, man, just God, give me the grace to finish the race. So
that's been one of my goals, my whole ministry. Yep.
Yeah. Then Maxwell just released a new book. That I think it's his 95th. I don't know, literally.
Yeah.
I was at an event with him a couple months back, and he told us about it's called The High Road Leader. And you're talking about an evangelist, his heart. We were at one of his leadership gatherings, and then he goes and does that invite back faith gathering, and like 150 people accept Christ. And he's burdened really right now in his lifetime about how sometimes the church can get mixed up in things and forget the main point. So he gave us a little encapsulation of it, then got a copy of it called The High Road Leader.
Okay, I just wrote that one down, man.
Really good. So those are two, and then I got 3 books on Ecclesiastes. I'm about
all right.
preaching on it in the fall.
Okay, another fun one on your break. What are you going to be watching? You watching any Netflix shows? You watching it? Got any movies you want to see?
We are in the middle of Under the Bridge. I don't know if you've seen it yet. It's on Hulu.
I have it.
It's set in the 90s in Canada, about a teenage Indian girl who gets involved with some foster kids, and she ends up dying, and we don't know if it's a murder yet.
Okay.
So we like those we like dark kind of murder mystery stuff.
My wife, man. Yeah, I watch a lot of this. Okay, one last question. If you could listen to any genre of music, what would it be?
If I had to pick one
genre.
That is really difficult. I would have to go rock. And I would have to go with our mutual love for U2. If I could only listen to one and ever, it would be.
And I mean, part of that rock thing comes out of your Georgia football days, too, getting ready for the game. Well, I know that. Yeah, everyone. Paul Taylor, thanks for being on the Church Planting Podcast.
Hey, my honor, my pleasure. God bless you guys. So excited for the 100th episode and everything God's doing through Stadia. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast, part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.